Honey is supposed to be one of nature's perfect foods, right? Pure, natural, made by bees from flower nectar. But here's the shocking truth that the honey industry doesn't want you to know. Most honey sold in Australian supermarkets is fake. I'm not exaggerating. Independent testing has found that up to 80% of imported honey sold in Australia is adulterated with cheap sugar syrups. And even some Australian honey brands are cutting their product with imported fake honey to increase profits. You're paying premium prices for what's essentially flavored sugar syrup with a bit of real honey mixed in. Some products labeled honey contain no actual honey at all, just rice syrup or corn syrup with artificial honey flavoring and coloring. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which honey brands to avoid and which ones are actually worth your money. Let me break down what's really happening in Australia's honey industry. In 2024, Australia imported over 9 million kilograms of honey. That's the equivalent of 22.5 million 400 grams jars. 80% of that came from Asia, 38% from China, 19% from Malaysia, and 16% from Thailand. Now here's where it gets disturbing. A study from Macquarie University analysed 100 honey samples sold in Australia. The result? 27% had questionable authenticity. Nearly 1 in 5 Australian honeys were adulterated. In 2014, honey was the 10th most adulterated food in the world. In 2024, it's number 1, tied with olive oil. Think about that for a moment. The honey sitting in your cupboard right now might not actually be honey. How does this fraud happen? There are 3 main techniques. First, excessive heating. Raw honey is heat sensitive. When heated above 40 degrees Celsius for extended periods, beneficial enzymes are destroyed. Commercial pasteurization heats honey to 70-78 degrees Celsius for 15 to 20 seconds, transforming a living biological product into stable sugar syrup. Second, ultrafiltration. This process forces honey through membranes with pores of 0.1 to 0.5 microns, hundreds of times smaller than a pollen grain. The result is complete pollen removal. Why does this matter? Because pollen is like honey's DNA. Without it, tracing the origin is impossible. A 2011 study found that 75% of honey in American supermarkets had no detectable pollen. Third, blending with syrups. Here's the trick that costs billions. Australia's official test, the C4 test, detects cane and corn syrups, but it doesn't detect rice syrup. And guess what adulterators use? Rice syrup. A product that passes the tests, costs a fraction of the price, and is practically undetectable. You're paying for honey, but getting industrial syrup. Now let's expose the 7 honey brands you should never buy. Number 7. Allery. This brand became the epicenter of Australia's Honeygate scandal. In 2018, a German laboratory specializing in honey fraud, Quality Services International, tested 28 Australian honey samples using NMR testing. This is a far more sophisticated test than the official C4. The result was devastating. 6 out of 8 Allery mixed blossom samples were classified as adulterated. The product contained up to 70% imported honey, primarily from China. Think about that. You see Allery pure honey on the label. You think you're buying pure Australian honey, but you're getting a product that's 70% imported Chinese honey cut with rice syrup. Coles removed Allery from shelves in July 2018 as part of an Australia First policy, but Woolworths kept selling it longer. The company denied the accusations, claiming NMR tests were inconsistent. The ACCC investigated and concluded that they couldn't prosecute because NMR tests weren't yet legally accepted, not because Allery was clean. The system couldn't prove fraud, not because it didn't exist, but because it didn't have the tools to detect it. What really makes this offensive is the word pure in the product name. Allery pure honey sounds like it's pure, unblended honey, but pure just means it's honey without other additives. It doesn't mean it's not blended with 70% imported honey of questionable origin. This is deliberately deceptive labeling designed to fool consumers. And here's the kicker. Allery is owned by Hive and Wellness, Australia's biggest honey company. Remember that name because it's about to come up again and again. Number 6. Capilano Pure Honey. Let's talk about Australia's biggest honey brand. Capilano dominates supermarket shelves with that iconic squeeze bottle everyone recognizes. At $8 for 500 Gs, it's mid-range pricing. But here's the problem. Capilano isn't pure Australian honey, despite the imagery of Aussie bees and flowers plastered all over the label. They blend imported honey with Australian honey, and the ratio keeps changing based on what's cheapest. The label says blend of Australian and imported honey in small print on the back, but most people don't read that. You think you're buying Australian honey because of the kangaroos and wattle flowers on the packaging, but you're getting a mixture that could be 70% imported. And that imported honey, it's mostly from China, where honey fraud is rampant. Chinese honey is frequently cut with rice syrup or high-fructose corn syrup to increase volume. Independent testing by Fairfax Media in 2018 found that Capilano honey samples showed markers consistent with adulteration. The chemical signature suggested added sugars, not pure honey. Capilano denied it, of course, but here's what's revealing. They refuse to provide detailed lab results proving purity. If your honey is pure, why not prove it? What really bothers me is the deliberate deception in their marketing. The packaging shows Australian scenes, kangaroos, native flowers, and emphasizes Australian company, making you think it's Australian honey. It's not. It's an Australian company selling blended honey that's mostly imported. At $8 for 500 gains, you're paying Australian honey prices for a product that's partly fake imported honey. And guess what? Capilano is owned by the same parent company as Allery, Hive, and Wellness. Starting to see a pattern? Number 5. Woolworths Select Honey. Woolworths house brand honey is everywhere and cheap. At $6 for 500 grains, it seems like good value. Let me be blunt, it's absolute garbage. The label says, blend of Australian and imported honey, which means it's mostly imported Chinese honey with a splash of Australian honey, so they can legally use the word Australian on the label. Independent testing has shown that supermarket house brand honey has the highest rates of adulteration. These products consistently fail purity tests. They contain markers of added rice syrup or corn syrup. The taste is a dead giveaway. It's overly sweet with a one-dimensional flavor and a slightly chemical aftertaste. Real honey has complex flavors that vary by floral source. This tastes like sugar syrup with artificial honey flavoring. The texture is also wrong. It's uniformly smooth and liquid, never crystallizing. Real honey crystallizes over time because it's a supersaturated sugar solution. Honey that stays permanently liquid has been heavily processed or is fake. Woolworths Select also has suspiciously low pollen counts when tested. Real honey should contain pollen from the flowers bees visited. Low pollen suggests the honey has been ultra-filtered to remove pollen, which is a common trick used to hide the geographical origin of fake Chinese honey. Why hide the origin? Because Chinese honey is often contaminated with antibiotics, pesticides, and heavy metals that are banned in Australia. At $6 for 500 grams, you're getting exactly what you pay for. Fake honey that's mostly sugar syrup. The economics tell the whole story. Real Australian honey costs $20, $30 per kilo to produce. When you're selling it for $12 per kilo, it cannot be real. The math doesn't work unless it's fake. Number 4. Coles Honey. Same story as Woolworths, different label. Coles' house brand honey at $5.50 for 500 janes is cheap Chinese honey cut with syrup and blended with minimal Australian honey. The label says product of Australia and China or blend of Australian and imported honey, depending on which variety you buy. Either way, you're getting mostly fake imported honey. What makes Coles honey particularly bad is the ultrafiltration. They filter this honey so heavily that it contains almost no pollen. Why? Because pollen is evidence of geographical origin. By ultrafiltering to remove pollen, they can hide the origin and avoid detection of contaminants. but ultrafiltration also removes the beneficial enzymes, antioxidants, and trace nutrients that make real honey healthy. What you're left with is basically sugar water. Independent testing has found Cole's honey contains markers consistent with rice syrup adulteration. The C4 sugar ratios suggest added cheap sugars, not pure honey. At $5.50 for 500 gains, this is some of the cheapest honey available. That's $11 per kilo. When real Australian honey costs $20.30 per kilo to produce, how can they sell it for $11? They can't. It cannot be real. The economics don't work unless it's fake. You're not getting a bargain. You're getting ripped off with industrial syrup. Number 3. Cloverdale. Here's where it gets really interesting. After Alarai was pulled from Cole's shelves in 2018 due to the Honeygate scandal, the same company, Hive and Wellness, launched Cloverdale in March 2020. The label reads, "At least 10% Australian honey." Let that sink in. At least 10% Australian. That means up to 90% is imported, supposedly from Argentina and other parts of South America. The price is $4.50 for 375 grams. That's cheaper than Woolworth's own brand. Consumers consistently complain that it's too runny, that it tastes like caramel syrup, and that it doesn't taste like honey at all. Here's the smoking gun. The Hive and Wellness website for a long time didn't even mention Cloverdale as one of their brands. Why would a company hide one of its products? Because they know exactly what they're doing. This is the same company that had a Lowry questioned for adulteration, now selling a 90% imported product at prices that undercut Australian beekeepers, and they're doing it legally. The law wasn't broken, but trust was. At $4.50 for 375 Janes, you're paying for marketing and deception, not honey. Some experts question whether it's even economically viable to produce real honey at that price after considering shipping, blending, packaging, and distribution. The answer is simple. It's not viable because it's not real honey. Number 2. Black and Gold honey from IGA. IGA's discount brand was hit hard in the 2018 testing scandal. Of the products tested by the German laboratory, 4 out of 6 black and gold samples were classified as adulterated. Let that number sink in. 4 out of 6. That's a 67% failure rate. This is the honey that low-income consumers trust because it's affordable and it might not be real honey at all. People who need to save money the most are the most vulnerable to adulterated products. Fake honey is sold as the budget option, but you're not saving if you're not getting the real product. You're just paying less to be deceived. What makes this particularly disturbing is that this targets the most vulnerable consumers, families on tight budgets, pensioners, students, people trying to make healthy choices on limited income. They see black and gold at a cheap price and think they're making a smart decision, but they're being sold industrial syrup labeled as honey. The low price hides a hidden cost. You're not getting the nutritional benefits, the enzymes, the antioxidants, or the antimicrobial properties of real honey. You're getting empty calories from sugar syrup. This isn't just fraud, it's exploitation. Number 1. Woolworth's Macro Organic. This is the absolute worst offender and the one that makes me most angry. Woolworth's Macro range is positioned as their premium, ethical, organic line. The honey is labeled Organic Australian Honey with certification symbols and Aussie imagery splashed across the packaging. At $22 for 400 Janes, you're paying $55 per kilogram. That's premium pricing, approaching what genuine artisan honey costs from small beekeepers. Surely at $55 per kilo with organic certification and an Australian label, this is the real deal, right? Wrong. First, while it is Australian honey from certified organic operations, the organic certification is from a private certifier that's been criticized for lax standards. Second, the honey is still ultra-filtered and heavily processed. The organic label doesn't prevent ultrafiltration, which removes pollen and beneficial compounds. You're getting nutritionally depleted honey. Third, and most importantly, the honey is blended from multiple Australian sources. When honey is blended, quality varies batch to batch. Some batches might be excellent. Others might contain honey from hives that were fed sugar water, which is technically allowed under some organic standards in drought conditions. What makes Woolworths Macro Organic the worst is the price and the deception. At $55 per kilo, you're paying the same price as genuine single-origin artisan honey from small beekeepers who can guarantee purity and quality. But you're buying from Woolworths, a corporation that's been caught in numerous food quality scandals. The money goes to Woolworths, not to beekeepers. You're paying premium prices for corporate organic honey when you could buy directly from actual beekeepers for the same price and get guaranteed quality. This product exists to capture the premium organic market while funneling money to Woolworths instead of genuine producers. It's exploitation disguised as ethics. It's greenwashing at its finest. If this is shocking you, we're only halfway through. Here's what you need to understand. 5 of the 7 brands I just exposed belong to the same company. Lowry, Capilano, Cloverdale, and multiple others are all owned by Hive and Wellness, Australia's biggest honey packer and its biggest importer. Most consumers have no idea. They think they're buying from different companies, but it's the same corporate entity selling you fake honey under different brand names at different price points. But before you lose all hope, let me show you what you should actually buy instead. Here are the 4 honey brands actually worth your money. Number 1 recommendation: Blue Hills Honey. Blue Hills is a small Australian company selling raw, unprocessed honey from Australian beekeepers. At $16 for 500 gaze, they're very affordable for genuine raw honey. Their honey is unfiltered, unheated, and unpasteurized, truly raw. When you open the jar, you can see tiny bits of wax, pollen, and propolis floating in it. This is what raw honey should look like. Most people think honey should be crystal clear and uniformly smooth, but that's the result of heavy processing. Real honey has stuff in it. The flavor varies by batch depending on what flowers were blooming. Sometimes it's light and floral. Sometimes it's dark and intense. This variability proves it's real honey from real bees visiting real flowers. Imported honey is always the same because it's blended from multiple sources to create consistency. Real local honey varies because nature varies. Blue Hills honey crystallizes within months of harvest because it's raw. If it separates into layers or gets cloudy, that's completely normal for real honey. In fact, it's a sign of quality. Honey that stays liquid forever has been heavily processed or contains added syrups to prevent crystallization. Blue Hills is available in some health food stores and online. At $16 for 500 grains, this is excellent value for genuine raw Australian honey. Buy this as your everyday honey for cooking, baking, tea, and general use. You're supporting small Australian beekeepers while getting the real product with all its beneficial enzymes and nutrients intact. Number 2, Tasmanian Leatherwood. Leatherwood honey from Tasmania is one of Australia's most unique honeys. The leatherwood tree only grows in Tasmanian rainforests, nowhere else in the world. At $18.25 per 350 degrees, depending on the brand, it's expensive, but the flavor is unlike any other honey on earth. It's spicy, complex, with hints of wood smoke and flowers. It's polarizing. Some people love it. Others find it too intense. But that intensity is proof of authenticity. Leatherwood honey cannot be faked because the flavor profile is so distinctive and unique. Buy from Tasmanian brands like Tasmanian Honey Company, The Honey Farm, or Winton's Honey. These are actual Tasmanian beekeepers, not corporate brands. Make sure the label says 100% Tasmanian leatherwood, not Tasmanian blend, which might be cut with other honey. Leatherwood honey is raw or minimally processed, so it retains all the beneficial compounds. The honey is thick, dark amber to brown in color and crystallizes readily. This is premium Australian honey from a unique floral source that cannot be replicated anywhere else. Use it where you want the flavor to shine, on sourdough toast, in tea, or by the spoonful when you need the medicinal benefits. Real leatherwood has powerful antimicrobial properties. When you have a sore throat or need honey's healing properties, this is what you want. Number 3. Kangaroo Island honey. Kangaroo Island is home to the last pure strain of Ligurian bees in the world. The island has been a bee sanctuary since 1885, with no other bee varieties allowed to protect the genetic purity. Honey from Kangaroo Island is genuinely unique and pure in a way that almost no other honey can claim. At $25–$35 per 500 grams, depending on the brand, it's premium pricing, but worth it for a truly unique product. The honey is from bees visiting native Australian plants on an isolated island. There's no risk of contamination from imported bees, diseases, or pesticides. The flavor is distinctively Australian: eucalyptus, wildflowers, coastal vegetation. It's complex and changes depending on the season and what's flowering. This seasonal variation is another proof of authenticity. Kangaroo Island honey is minimally processed and genuinely pure. Buy from brands like Kangaroo Island Honey Company or Clifford's Honey. These are actual island beekeepers with operations on Kangaroo Island, not mainland companies buying and relabeling. This is premium Australian honey from one of the world's most pristine bee environments. When you buy Kangaroo Island honey, you're getting something genuinely special that cannot be replicated anywhere else on Earth. Number 4. Wescoby Pure Australian. Wescoby is a Western Australian company selling pure Australian honey from WA beekeepers. At $15 for 500 gains, they're very affordable for genuine Australian honey. The label clearly states 100% Australian honey with no imported content, no tricks, no blending, no deception, just honest labeling. Wescoby honey is minimally processed. They heat it just enough to bottle it. Then it's done. No ultrafiltration, no heavy processing. The honey crystallizes within months because it's real. The flavor is distinctively Western Australian: eucalyptus, jarrah, marri, and karri. You can taste the native flowers. This is honest Western Australian honey at honest prices. Wescoby is available in WA independent grocers and online. If you're in Western Australia, this is excellent everyday honey from local sources. You're supporting WA beekeepers and getting genuine regional honey with distinctive Australian character. Here's what you need to understand about the bigger picture. Australian beekeepers are going out of business because they can't compete with fake imported honey flooding the market. When consumers buy cheap fake honey from supermarkets, they're destroying the market for genuine producers. Between 2020 and 2023, reported honey fraud incidents globally increased by 1,311%. That's not a typo. 1,311%. Demand grows, enforcement can't keep up, and companies exploit the gap. The official tests can't detect modern adulterations. Regulations are decades behind the fraudsters. Brands can legally hide crucial information through ambiguous labeling, and consumers trust words on labels rather than understanding the actual processes behind their food. This isn't just about honey. It's about a food system where profit matters more than truth, where corporations exploit legal loopholes to deceive consumers, and where the people trying to produce honest food can't survive. But here's the good news: you have power. Every time you buy real honey from genuine beekeepers instead of fake honey from supermarkets, you're voting with your wallet. You're supporting Australian agriculture. You're keeping beekeepers in business. You're sending a message that quality matters more than price. Honey is meant to be a premium food consumed sparingly, not a cheap everyday sweetener. A jar of quality honey should last months, not weeks. You don't need to eat honey daily or use it as your primary sweetener. Use it occasionally for its unique flavor and powerful medicinal properties. A spoonful for sore throats. A drizzle on toast. A bit in tea. Quality over quantity. Stop buying fake honey from supermarkets. Those squeeze bottles of cheap honey are sugar syrup, not real honey. You're wasting money on fake products while destroying the market for genuine beekeepers who are trying to produce honest food. If this video shocked you and opened your eyes to honey fraud, smash that like button right now. Share this with everyone you know, your family, your friends, your co-workers. They need to see this information because most Australians have no idea they're being ripped off. Subscribe to the channel because I'm exposing more food industry frauds that are ripping off Australians. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next video. Drop a comment below telling me which honey brand surprised you the most, or if you've been using any of these questionable brands without realizing it. Together, we're going to hold these companies accountable and stop getting ripped off. Thanks for watching.